Welcome to week 7 and the language and the borders of acceptability, being rude in the media, and how far can we go? So, this lecture is going to look at what is acceptable and unacceptable within the media, how that works not just in the press media, but also a little bit about social media as well, and a little bit as well to start with, looking at what the rules are and the laws are around these borders of acceptability in the mainstream media. And then we'll move on and look at some of the theories underpinning our notions of politeness in language and linguistics. And then finally, we'll end up with looking a little bit at social media. So we'll start with what's deemed acceptable or in the mainstream press. So this dates from 2016, but the list of the UK's most offensive words are pretty much the same now. So we're only 4 years on. So this is from Ofcom. Ofcom is the Office of Communications that is responsible. They're the watchdog body, if you like. So they're the people that keep an eye on what appears on the media, and it's where, if we have a complaint, not just about, if we have a complaint about the BBC, for example, we can complain directly to the BBC or to whichever broadcasting outlet. If the Channel 4 puts out something that we find offensive, we can complain directly to them. If it's any of the other commercial channels, likewise, we can complain directly to them, whether it's the radio or online viewing or terrestrial TV. But the body that oversees all of that, so the manager, if you like, is Ofcom. So to rely on the currently famous meme about a white woman called Karen, if Karen came across something she didn't like, she wouldn't just go to the BBC and ask to speak to their manager, which might be the head of programming at the BBC, but she might actually go straight on to Ofcom, who is the one really in charge, or who at least gets to do the policing. So this is the list of what Ofcom say are the UK's most offensive words. Now you can see, we've got a list there of words that, as it says there, are general swear words and body parts. And there are an awful lot of words there that are very sound Anglo-Saxon words that have been around for centuries. And they are deemed to be offensive. And it tends to be the case that the words that we find offensive are those to do with sort of what we might deem as private body parts, so genitals, but also any other sort of bodily functions related to them. And then as well, words related to sex and religion. So this is essentially, as it says there, the words that you can and can't say on television or in any broadcast. And if you look along the top there, it's the first section is milder words, generally of little concern. So those words may not actually be deemed acceptable during children's television, but actually they are the words that you wouldn't really get into too much trouble for in sort of normal television broadcasts that aren't aimed at children. The medium words, as it says there, potentially unacceptable pre-watershed, but acceptable post-watershed. So this idea of the watershed we'll talk about in a moment, but essentially we have this now artificial dividing line between a time of day where you can say certain things at night because you're more likely to have an adult audience, and other things that you can't say during the daytime when you're more likely to have children viewing. And then, as it says, it goes on to stronger words, mostly acceptable post-watershed, and then the very strongest words. So these are highly unacceptable. These are not the words that you would hear on daytime television, for example, but you probably would hear them post-watershed, and television programs aimed at adults, with sort of adult content, or with themes of sort of violence and sex and drug taking and so on. So this is what the UK has as their most offensive words, and what's regarded as offensive in language in the UK is not necessarily the same as what's regarded as offensive in other countries, not even other English speaking countries. So, if we were to compare this to a list of words that would be deemed acceptable or unacceptable in the United States, for example, or in Australia, then we wouldn't necessarily have the same list. And the same with other countries that sort of have English as their sort of their main language. So there are India, for example, wouldn't necessarily have this same list, and as I say, Australia and New Zealand and various other places around the globe. America is probably the easiest to compare this list to, mainly because America, of course, we've had traditionally Hollywood and Hollywood movies, and as you've probably seen when you've watched films, at the very beginning there is the board of certification telling you whether the film has been cleared for universal audiences, so a U categorization, which means that it can be seen by children and anyone, or then a 12 or a PG, which means parental guidance, then a 12, a 15, and an 18. So each of those have certain allocations of language that falls into a sort of a similar pattern to the list that we have here, but in America there is a certain amount of what we could call horse trading that goes on, and that horse trading is whereby for certain films, when they are being passed by the board of certification to be able to be shown, what will happen is that not just the language but also the images, so a certain amount of nudity will be allowed in films with higher certifications, and this horse trading will be the case of, well, you're allowed to show female breasts, but you're only allowed to do it once. You're allowed to say the word, I don't know, shit twice. But if you say shit twice, you can't show women's breasts 3 times. And absolutely there is this sort of allowance that can be used up or not. And of course, some of it is also dependent upon individual actors, as well as some actors will not use certain language, although that's less likely. The more common is that some actresses or actors will have nudity clauses, so they are not prepared to have any nudity at all, or particularly in the case of female actors, they are not prepared to show their breasts, whereas it's dependent upon the film, and some will, and so on. So this is why in the media, whether it's film or television, we often have quite artificial looking scenes and artificial sounding scenes. So, for example, if you're a fan of UK soap operas, so TV programmes, that are long running, that we call soap operas because they used to be sponsored by companies who make soap and they paid for the advertising, so that's why they've got the name of soap operas. So, programs like EastEnders and Coronation Street and Emmerdale, that type of TV program that's, has gone on for decades and never has a sort of a defined end. Particularly something like EastEnders, which is set, as the name implies, in the East End of London, yet virtually nobody swears, or certainly the sort of swearing they do is, the most that you might get is in the that second column of medium words. And even then, they're really careful. It's more likely that you'll have those milder words and not much else, which can make it appear less than realistic, because just a wander around most cities, but certainly if you go to the areas of London where EastEnders is set, you're going to find that the world is not at all as it's depicted in that show. For a start, the show is not as perhaps diverse as the reality of that part of London. So. And certainly, you're not going to hear just people speaking English all the time, and those that are speaking English will be using, or will be in the real world, they will be peppering their conversation with quite a great deal of what we might term offensive words. So a lot of the time things like soap operas can feel quite unrealistic, and this is also the reason why an awful lot of particularly TV shows that deal with crime tend to now have to be on quite late at night, because they want to be able to depict the reality of the world, and that includes using the language that people use in the real world when they're under a great deal of stress, which those crime shows tend to show. And likewise with films, if you see a sort of a bedroom love scene, then it's common for the characters to get out of bed wearing their underwear or some other clothing, which again might actually be quite unrealistic. But let's not forget that things have developed a great deal, because if you go back to looking at film of the 1950s and 60s, but particularly the 50s, you'll find that it was the case that if there was a bedroom scene, the characters had to be fully clothed, and the bedrooms tended to depict twin beds, so two beds, and if there was any interaction on the bed, in the way of kissing, for example, one of the characters had to always, and this is quite ridiculous, but one of the characters always had to make sure that one foot remained on the floor. So there were these very highly prescriptive rules about what you could and could not show on screen. And it's not really until the sort of the 1960s and towards the end of the 60s when it's actually France that leads the way with cinema verite, showing the truth, and they start to depict the reality and of life. And because of that move in the 1960s, French cinema, and in fact European cinema as a whole, has always therefore had the reputation of depicting a great deal of nudity and being far more daring than quite conservative film styles of Hollywood. And you can even see that in the differences between British films and again Hollywood. So although we in the UK perhaps take more of a lead from America in the way of film, or have done in the past, we in the UK have been highly influenced by European cinema. So, and in American film, Hollywood films, in order to find that sort of that more cinema verite, that truth-like cinema, you really have to go to independent movies. Anyway, moving on. So, what's this watershed? So, I mentioned this. It's essentially a 9 o'clock deadline. And before 9 p.m., you have to, as it says, there are very strict rules about what can be shown. And then after 9 p.m., you can actually show things that are unsuitable perhaps for children. Now there is a problem with that. So this screenshot about television and the watershed has been taken from the Ofcom website, which is easily available online. You can go and have a look. And in fact, if you decide to do this particular essay, the essay that relates to this week, you may want to go and have a look and see exactly what Ofcom says. But also, if you're interested in this notion of, what we can and can't say and the boundaries of politeness, then again, it's also quite interesting to go and see what Ofcom actually says. Now, as I've said, there is a problem that you may have realised with this notion of this watershed of 9 p.m, and that, of course, is television on demand, which increasingly we are all using, not just through watching on devices, like PCs and laptops and tablets, but also increasingly televisions are being sold where you plug them into the telephone line, and they're smart TVs. So we have internet access through our television, and that means that we can watch things on the iPlayer or Netflix and other on-demand services whenever we want, not just after 9 p.m. And so the way that the BBC deals with this is this parental guidance lock. And of course, sensible parents will perhaps have their television organised, or their internet even organised, their broadband organised, so that there is some form of net nanny that actually ensures that everything that comes into the house is censored. But that particularly as children get older and sort of beyond the age of about 9 or 10, most kids these days can actually find ways around that. So what do people do? And you might think back to when you were that sort of age, and the sorts of things that you were actually gaining access to on television and online. So you can see that the BBC have this parental guidance lock pop up that comes up, and it says this programme may contain strong language and some sexual content, and all that's required is for the viewer to tick the box to say that they're age 16 or over. Well, it doesn't really take a genius to work out that the average 8-year-old or younger could easily tick that box and then watch whatever the programme is. So and that's not something that's necessarily a new development, in as much as before television on demand, we were able to record television programmes with video recorders and then watch the programme asynchronously. So watch them whenever we chose to, because we'd recorded them from last night. And before video recorders, it may not have been so easy to access film and television at that was on late at night, although some people, it was quite rare for people to have televisions in their bedrooms, but some people may have had TVs in their bedrooms. But children and young people have always been able to gain access to images that are perhaps inappropriate for their age. That's just the way that it's always been. But of course, society wants to try to maintain some way of protecting children and young adults from inappropriate images. And this currently is sort of the best way that we can do it, but it's not really satisfactory. So let's take a break now. Do have some thoughts about maybe go and have a look at Ofcom and their website, and also think about what was deemed acceptable when you were younger, and what you were allowed to watch and what you weren't allowed to watch, and who made those decisions. Was it your parents that made those decisions? Were there things that your friends were allowed to watch that you weren't allowed to watch? And not necessarily just television. Remember, the media does extend to, of course, yes, film, but also things like video games too. So, what games were you allowed to play that your friends weren't, or vice versa? So have a think about that. You might want to jot some of those ideas down, and we'll come back for the second section in a moment.